Someone is going to say something to you today that is meant to throw you off balance. Maybe it has already happened. A comment that hit a nerve, a criticism you didn't expect, a moment when your mind went completely blank, only for the perfect response to appear hours later when the conversation was long over. The Stoics understood this experience better than most people realize. They believed that when another person's words gain control over your emotions, you have surrendered something valuable. Not your status, not your reputation, but your inner peace. But what if things could be different? What if you had a set of responses so calm, so clear, and so grounded that no insult, criticism, or challenge could shake you? Not because you became more aggressive, not because you learned clever comebacks, but because you learned how to stay in command of your own mind. That is what we're exploring today. Before we get into these 7 Stoic responses, I want you to think about something honestly. When was the last time someone's words ruined your mood? Maybe it was one sentence. Maybe it was a passing remark. Maybe it wasn't even intended to hurt you, yet somehow it stayed with you for hours or even days. The Stoics believed that understanding why this happens is the first step toward freedom. Epictetus, who endured hardship most people could hardly imagine, taught that people are not disturbed by events themselves. They are disturbed by the judgments they make about those events. Think about that carefully. The words themselves are only sounds. What creates the emotional storm is the story we build around them. We decide what those words mean. We decide whether they are an attack, a rejection, or a threat. And in doing so, we often create far more suffering than the original words ever could. Marcus Aurelius expressed a similar idea when he reminded himself that we have power over our minds, not over external events. He wasn't saying that criticism doesn't hurt. He wasn't pretending that cruel people don't exist. He was pointing toward something much more important. There is a difference between what happens to you and how you respond to it. One belongs to the world, the other belongs to you. And that distinction is the foundation of everything you're about to hear. The first response is surprisingly simple. I may be wrong. Most people hear those words and immediately associate them with weakness. They imagine that admitting the possibility of being wrong somehow reduces their authority or confidence. The Stoics believed the exact opposite. Marcus Aurelius, despite being one of the most powerful men on earth, wrote that if someone could show him a better way of thinking, he would gladly change his position. That kind of humility wasn't weakness. It was strength. Why? Because truth mattered more to him than ego. When someone attacks your opinion, they usually expect resistance. They expect you to defend yourself. They expect an argument. But the moment you calmly acknowledge that you could be mistaken, the entire dynamic changes. Suddenly there is no fight. There is no wall to push against. There is no ego demanding protection. You demonstrate something far more powerful than certainty. You demonstrate confidence in your ability to learn. A person who cannot be wrong lives in constant fear. Every disagreement becomes a threat. Every criticism becomes an attack. Every challenge becomes a battle. But a person who is comfortable with the possibility of being mistaken becomes almost impossible to provoke, because they are not trying to protect an image. They are trying to discover what is true. Imagine the next time someone criticizes your opinion. Instead of instantly defending yourself, imagine asking a different question. What if they see something I don't? You don't have to agree. You don't have to surrender your position. You simply remain open to the possibility that there may be more to learn, and that openness is a form of strength most people never develop. The second response is even more powerful: silence. Many people assume silence means weakness. They believe that if someone challenges them, they must respond immediately. They must defend themselves. They must say something. The Stoics understood that this impulse often creates more problems than it solves. Seneca frequently warned against spending time and energy arguing with people who had no interest in understanding. He recognized that not every challenge deserves engagement. Not every criticism deserves a response. Not every insult deserves your attention. When someone provokes you, they are often seeking something from you. Your anger, your frustration, your reaction. They want energy, and silence refuses to provide it. Not angry silence, not passive-aggressive silence, but calm, deliberate silence. The silence of someone who has heard what was said, considered it, and decided it does not deserve an immediate response. Marcus Aurelius practiced this constantly. He understood that emotional reactions often reveal more about us than they do about the situation itself. When we rush to defend ourselves, we expose our weaknesses. We reveal exactly what affects us. But when we pause, when we remain composed, we keep control of the situation and, more importantly, control of ourselves. There is tremendous power in not reacting. The strongest person in the room is often not the loudest. It is the person who remains steady while everyone else loses their balance. The third response is simple but incredibly effective. That's an interesting perspective. At first glance, it may seem like an ordinary phrase, but beneath those words lies an important Stoic principle. You are acknowledging that another person has a viewpoint without allowing that viewpoint to dominate your thinking. You are listening without surrendering your judgment. You are remaining open without becoming emotionally attached. Epictetus constantly reminded his students that some things are within our control and some are not. Another person's opinion belongs to them. Your response belongs to you. When you say, "That's an interesting perspective," you are creating space between what they believe and what you choose to believe. You are not agreeing. You are not disagreeing. You are simply recognizing that another human being has arrived at a conclusion based on their own experiences, assumptions, and understanding of the world. Most arguments escalate because people feel the need to immediately prove someone wrong. The Stoics saw no wisdom in that. Instead, they encouraged curiosity. Curiosity allows you to observe without becoming defensive. Curiosity allows you to understand without becoming threatened. And curiosity often reveals that many disagreements are far less important than they initially appear. Marcus Aurelius regularly reminded himself that every person acts according to what they believe is right. Even when people are mistaken, they are usually acting from their own understanding of reality. Recognizing that fact creates patience, and patience creates peace. The fourth response is one of the most useful in modern life. Let me think about that. We live in a world that rewards immediate reactions. Everyone is expected to have an opinion instantly. Everyone is expected to respond immediately. But the Stoics believed that haste is often the enemy of wisdom. Seneca practiced daily reflection because he understood that time reveals things that emotion often hides. When someone says something challenging, your first reaction is rarely your best reaction. Emotion arrives quickly. Reason arrives later. That is why this response is so powerful. When you say, "Let me think about that," you are giving reason a chance to catch up. You are refusing to let emotion make decisions on your behalf. You are demonstrating respect for both yourself and the other person. Most people expect resistance when they challenge someone. Very few expect thoughtful consideration, and that alone can completely transform a conversation. Marcus Aurelius was known for carefully considering important decisions before acting. He understood that wisdom rarely emerges from urgency. It emerges from reflection. The same principle applies to everyday conversations. You do not need to have every answer immediately. You do not need to defend every opinion instantly. You do not need to react the moment someone disagrees with you. Sometimes the wisest response is simply to pause, to think, to reflect, and to allow reason to guide what comes next. Because every moment you choose reflection over reaction, you strengthen the very quality the Stoics valued most: self-mastery. You might be right. Notice how different those words feel compared to most responses people use during disagreements. Most conversations turn into battles because both sides are trying to prove something. They are trying to defend their position, protect their pride, or avoid looking wrong. The result is predictable. Neither person listens. Neither person learns. And both walk away more convinced of their own viewpoint than before. The Stoics believed that this approach misses the entire purpose of dialogue. The goal of a conversation is not victory. The goal is truth. When you say, "You might be right," you are not surrendering your beliefs. You are not admitting defeat. You are simply acknowledging that another possibility exists. That small shift changes everything. A person who is completely certain can no longer learn. Their mind becomes closed. Every disagreement feels like a threat, because accepting new information would require changing their position. But a Stoic does not fear being corrected. They welcome it. If another person can reveal something true, then they have provided a gift rather than an attack. That is why these words are so powerful. Most people expect resistance. Very few expect openness. And openness often disarms conflict faster than any argument ever could. Think about the last person who genuinely changed your mind about something important. It probably wasn't because they shouted louder than you. It probably wasn't because they embarrassed you. More likely, it was because they approached the conversation with respect. They made you feel safe enough to reconsider your position. That is exactly what this response creates. It transforms a confrontation into an opportunity for understanding. And in a world where everyone wants to be heard, the willingness to truly listen is a rare form of strength. The sixth response is one that is often spoken silently. This doesn't require my reaction. Of all the Stoic principles, this may be one of the most important. Epictetus repeatedly taught that our freedom depends on our ability to choose what deserves our attention. Most people move through life reacting automatically. Someone criticizes them and they react. Someone insults them and they react. Someone disrespects them and they react. Every external event gains immediate access to their emotional state. The Stoics saw this as a form of slavery, because if other people can control your reactions, they can control your peace. The alternative is simple but difficult. Pause. Observe what is happening. Then ask yourself a question. Does this actually deserve my energy? Not every comment deserves a defense. Not every disagreement deserves a debate. Not every insult deserves a reply. Some situations become larger only because we continue feeding them with attention. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that many things lose their power the moment we stop giving them importance. This doesn't mean becoming passive. It doesn't mean allowing injustice. It simply means recognizing the difference between what matters and what doesn't. Imagine a colleague making a dismissive comment about your work. Your heart rate rises. Your mind immediately begins preparing a defense. You want to explain yourself. You want everyone to know they are wrong. But before reacting, imagine asking a different question. What outcome am I trying to achieve? Will reacting emotionally improve the situation? Will it make tomorrow better? Will it matter a month from now? Often the answer is no. And when that happens, the most intelligent response is not engagement. It is restraint. The Stoics understood something many people never learn. Not every battle is worth fighting. And the ability to walk away from unnecessary conflict is not weakness. It is wisdom. The final response may be the most difficult of all. Thank you for telling me. At first, those words seem impossible to say, especially when the criticism feels unfair. Why would you thank someone for saying something negative? Why would you express gratitude when someone has challenged or criticized you? The answer lies in how the Stoics viewed growth. Marcus Aurelius spent time reflecting on the people who shaped his character. He expressed gratitude not only for those who supported him, but also for those who challenged him. Because improvement rarely comes from comfort, it comes from correction. Now, this does not mean every criticism is valid. Many criticisms are inaccurate. Some are unfair. Others are motivated by jealousy, anger, or misunderstanding. The Stoics knew this, but they also understood something important. Even flawed criticism can contain useful information. It can reveal how others perceive you. It can expose blind spots. It can highlight weaknesses you have not yet noticed. When someone offers criticism, your first instinct may be to reject it immediately, to defend yourself, to explain why they are wrong. But the Stoic takes a different approach. First, they listen. Then, they evaluate. Then they decide what is useful and what should be discarded. That process begins with openness. And openness becomes much easier when you stop treating criticism as an attack and start treating it as information. Thank you for telling me does not mean the other person is correct. It means you are mature enough to consider what they have said without becoming defensive. And that level of self-control is incredibly rare. Now, let's bring everything together. We began with a simple question. What would it feel like to stop being controlled by other people's words? Not occasionally, not sometimes, but consistently. The 7 responses we've explored are not tricks. They are not clever lines designed to win arguments. They are habits of thought, ways of seeing the world, ways of protecting your peace. I may be wrong. The courage to place truth above ego, silence, the strength to refuse unnecessary conflict. That's an interesting perspective. The ability to remain curious instead of defensive. Let me think about that. The wisdom to pause before reacting. You might be right. The openness to learn from others. This doesn't require my reaction. The freedom to choose where your energy goes. And finally, thank you for telling me. The humility to grow through feedback. None of these responses become part of your character overnight. The Stoics never expected perfection. Marcus Aurelius himself spent years reminding himself of these lessons. He wrote them down repeatedly because he understood that wisdom is not something you achieve once. It is something you practice every day. So tomorrow, choose just one of these responses. Not all 7, just one. The next time someone challenges you, criticizes you, or says something that would normally trigger an emotional reaction, pause and try it. See what happens. You may discover that the real power was never in finding the perfect comeback. The real power was in mastering yourself. Because, at the end of the day, your reputation is not your identity. Other people's opinions are not your identity. A single mistake is not your identity. What matters most is your ability to govern your own mind. And as Marcus Aurelius reminded himself during some of the most difficult moments of his life, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Until next time, stay calm, stay rational, and continue practicing the wisdom that has guided people for more than 2,000 years.